Hey everyone. So I decided to tell the story behind the songs that I've written and the novellas that I've written. If you don't know what a novella is, it's basically a short novel, but the technical term is a novel has to be a certain word count, and if it's shorter than that, then it's a novella. So they're not like fully completed books, but the ones that I'm going to talk about are pretty close to being full books. I think they're all like over 50 pages long on Google Docs. So on like book pages, that would be like more than 50 pages. But yeah, I'll start with those and then I'll get into the songs. So the first novel that I ever wrote is called A Billion Drops. I started writing it in high school when I was going through a season of a lot of loneliness and poor mental health and low self esteem issues. And this book was kind of a catharsis for me where the stories in it are fictional. There's a few scenes that are loosely based on my personal experience, but a lot of it is made up. But I was kind of in this place of like, okay, I feel like I'm going through a hard time. And I wrote this book where the character was going through an even harder time than I was because it made me feel better. Um, to, I guess, remind myself that there are like worse situations people go through. I know people say that's like toxic positivity, but for me personally, that that thought has never really been negative for me. Like it actually does help me to remember that there are worse things that people go through because it makes me feel like I'm not alone. And a big part of that story is seeing how the main character, Elaine, her relationship with her older brother, Carson, and her friend, Alicia, the two of them really help her through that hard time. So it was also a catharsis for me of not just getting to write about a character who was going through a hard time, but seeing how she had the proper emotional and social support to get her through that. And so a lot of writing the characters of Carson and Alicia was just born out of like, what do I wish that someone would say to me or do for me during those times? And then the next novel is called This Is Goodbye. It's based in a cute little town which does exist in real life called Seabrook in Washington State. It's kind of like a touristy beach town, but I think there's some people that actually live there all year round. And it's one of those books where the truth isn't really revealed until right at the end. So it's a big reveal. I'm going to spoil it for you. These books only live on Google Docs. So if you don't have access to that doc, there's no other way that you'd really get to read this. But basically, it's about this girl who has an identical twin sister. And unfortunately, her twin sister passes away in a surfing accident. And especially because they're identical twins, the other twin who survived, it's like a small town where everyone knows each other. And so after the death of her sister, she would be like walking around town and people would kind of be like very in her family's business and even just like looking at her and saying like, wow, like I thought that you were your sister for a second or you remind me so much of her. And so the environment, I guess, of like the grief was hard enough, but especially being in a town like that where everything is just so close knit, like the family just felt like they had to escape. And so they like moved away just to have some distance and some space from the town where that death happened. And then, but it was like very sudden. And so the main character feels like she has a lot of loose ends and unresolved things, like good relationships that she never got to properly thank those people for the role they played in her life, bad relationships that she never reconciled. And so the novel actually starts with the family like moving back. Um, but what happens is they're only in town for a month. It's just enough time for the main character, I honestly forget what her name was. I think it's like Lily, or no, that's the name of the sister. Anyways, the main character, she is only there for a month so that she has enough time to kind of give her final words to those past relationships that she had. And this is like, I don't think it specifies the amount of time in the book, but at least a year or like a good amount of time until they came back. But they come back and the people in the town still recognize her. But there's a new kid who lives, and a new family that lives next door to them, and they're new, so they like don't know who this family is, even though everyone else in the town knows them. And the main character is like, oh my gosh, this is great. Someone who like doesn't know my history, doesn't know about the past with my sister, like I can just be known for like who I am and not be known as the girl whose sister passed away. And so she like forms this friendship, but she like lies from the beginning already about who she is and like why she's in town. So she actually makes her friend think that they just moved there permanently. She doesn't even tell him that they're only in town for a month. And so near the end of the book, there's this big scene where like the truth comes out because things just kind of start to unravel, and and then the main character's like, I'm actually like moving tomorrow. Um, yeah, she like writes a letter to him, but then it's really beautiful because the friend actually ends up like still accepting her even though she lied to him. And then there's an epilogue where the main character actually moves back to the town, and she's in town for good, maybe not for the rest of her life, but for a longer amount of time. I think it's like to go to college or something, and then she ends up still being friends again with the guy. So, yeah, definitely like a redemption arc story. And there's a lot of other things in between when it just comes to like the kinds of friendships and relationships that you have with people and how that affects you over time and how much the past can change and things like that. Okay, and the last novel that I'm going to talk about is 31 Days of Summer. So, this is a book about a friend group, and the POV changes every chapter and it rotates between, I think it's the four girls in the friend group, but the main premise is that one of them has cancer. So, I guess it rotates between the POVs of the three other girls in the friend group. And another spoiler, there's like another guy who ends up like joining the group partway through the book and coming on all their adventures. But basically, this girl, they're all in high school. She's told that she has a limited amount of time left to live, and so her friends are really trying to support her, but they're not even allowed to visit her in the hospital that much. And they have this moment where they realize, okay, we don't want to spend the last days of our friend's life just like being sad. Like she actually, the girl who has cancer, has like a very adventurous spirit, and so her friend group is like, okay, in her honor, we're gonna do all of our favorite things together that we wish we could do with her that we can't because she's sick in the hospital. And every day for 31 days straight, they do like an intentional fun activity together. So it's this weird dynamic in the book, like a balance of like this lighthearted, all these lighthearted scenes of like fun things they're doing, but the actual root of it is like very somber because of the situation with their friend. And yeah, so at the end of each day, they like take a Polaroid and they're like day one, day two, day three, and they write like a little caption on the Polaroid. And their plan is to put it all in this shoebox and then give it to their friend. I think her name is Jenna, like as a surprise gift. Um, some very big spoilers. Basically, right when they're, or no, like a few days before the 31st day when they were planning to like give her this shoebox, um, they're like out of town on a trip as part of their adventures, and then they get a call that she's not doing well, and they had been debating if they should even go on this trip, um, because of the risk of like, what if something happens to her while we're gone? But then they were like, no, we should still do it. But then that's what ends up happening. She's like not doing well. They come back, and unfortunately, she passes away like, I think it's like not even an hour before the friend group arrives at the hospital. And so it kind of feels like, and then they have this shoebox with them, and they're like, this is so dumb. Like, we were supposed to give her this gift, but we never even got to give it to her. Like, we weren't there to say goodbye. Like, she doesn't even know the real reason, like, why we weren't there. And so all of that is kind of like part one of the book. And then part two actually follows the story of how each of the people in the friend group kind of copes in their own way with the grief of life after their friend passes away, and they're only in high school. And of course, they're all taking it hard, and they kind of, get involved in different things, trying to get back on track with their life after this. But there's one girl in particular. I think her name is Sadie. As you can tell, I don't really remember the characters' names that well. She like has a particularly hard time because she actually, the rest of them are coping in healthy ways, but then for her, she starts turning to alcohol, and her friends notice and they call her out on it, and they think that it's just because of the grief. But then what they don't know is that her parents are actually also going through a divorce, and that is the real reason. That mixed in with, of course, her friend's passing, like all of it just kind of culminated in this unhealthy coping mechanism. But yeah, her friends are there to support her and help her like get out of that, of course. So yeah, as you can see, a lot of the song or a lot of the books are like very heavy and not super light themes, but yeah, I think I actually enjoyed writing them because of that. Um, I think I find it easier to like emotionally connect with the story as I'm writing it if it's something that's like more sad than happy. And I think it's important to, yeah, feel connected to whatever you're writing, because then that makes it flow more easily. So I think I'm actually gonna do a separate video talking about my songs, because I didn't think that I would talk about the books for that long, but this is already a whole video in its own. So I will see you in the next video.